Northern Norway is the geographical region of Norway, consisting of the three northernmost counties Nordland, Troms and Finnmark. In total about 35% of the Norwegian mainland. Some of the largest towns in northern Norway are Rana, Bodø, Narvik, Harstad, Tromsø and Alta. Northern Norway is often described as the land of the midnight sun and the land of the northern lights. Further north, halfway to the North Pole, is the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard, traditionally not regarded as part of northern Norway. The region is multicultural, housing not just Norwegians but also the indigenous Sami people, Norwegian Finns and Russian populations. The Norwegian language dominates in most of the area. Sami speakers are mainly found inland and in some of the fjord areas of Nordland, Troms and particularly Finnmark, though ethnic Sami who do not speak the language are found more or less everywhere in the region. Finnish is spoken in only a few communities in the east of Finnmark. Geography. Northern Norway covers about a third of Norway. The southernmost part, roughly the part south of the Arctic Circle, is called Helgeland. Here there is a multitude of islands and skerries on the outside of the coastal range, some flat, some with impressive shapes, like Mount Torgatin, which has a hole through it, and the Seven Sisters near Sandnessjøen. The inland is covered with dense spruce forests and mountains near the Swedish border. Some of the biggest rivers in the region of the Vefsna and the Rana. The highest mountain in northern Norway is found here in the Oakstenden range south of Mo I Rana, with Oakskolten reaching 1,915 meters above sea level, and with the glacier Oakstindbreen. The Saltfjellet range, with its Svartisen glacier and intersecting Arctic Circle, divides Helgeland from the next region, called Salten. Notable peaks in Salten of the Borgvasten south of Bodø, Suleskrongen near Fask, the Stigartenden and the Fallik Hammerøytenden. Between Saltfjellet and eastern Finnmark, Norway spruce trees have originally been planted and are mostly privately owned. The older plantations are now producing lumber 80 years after planted. Lofoten is a chain of peaks that jut out of the ocean. For the mainland side it looks very barren, but behind the violet-black peaks there are also flatlands with good grazing for sheep, partially on soil made from seaweed. The Vesteraalen Islands consist of smaller and bigger islands with a huge variation in landscape. Ofoten, further inland, is a fjord landscape with high mountains. The highest is Storsteinfjellet in Narvik, 1,894 meters above sea level, but the most well-known is Stettent, the national mountain of Norway. There are also glaciers like Frostisen and Blazen. Troms County has surprising greenery for the latitude, and the inner waterways and fjords are lined with birch forests. And further inland there are extensive pine forests and highlands around the rivers Malselva and Reyselva. Big islands like Senja, Kvaløya and Ringvassøy have green, forested interiors and a barren, mountainous coastline, with smaller islands offshore. The Lyngen Alps are the highest mountains of the area, rising to 1,833 meters, an area of glaciers and waterfalls. The 269 meters Mollisfossen waterfall in Nordreisa is the highest waterfall in the north, while Malselfossen is Norway's national waterfall. Finnmark County has fjords and glaciers in the far southwest, and the northwestern coasts are characterized by big islands, like Sorøya and Sealand. The inland is covered by Finnmarksvidda, a relatively barren plateau about 300 to 400 meters high, with many lakes and rivers like Alta Kautokeino and Tana Dethnu. Even at this latitude, pine forests grow naturally in lowland areas inland. East of Honningsvåg, there are no islands protecting the barren coasts that rise directly up from the sea. The landscape towards the Russian border is comparatively flat. Nivsfjellodden on the island of Majorøya marks the northern end of Europe. Tourism is directed to the much more accessible North Cape, whereas Knaerodden on the Nordkinn Peninsula is the northernmost point of Europe's mainland. Finnmark is situated north of northernmost Finland, and to the east Norway has a 196 km border with Russia. History. The oldest known historical culture in the region is called Komsa, named after a mountain in Alta. The first people possibly arrived around 12–13,000 years ago, but it is uncertain whether they came from southern Norway or from the Kola Peninsula. Today the rock carvings at Gemmeluft in Alta or at Lekna in Nordland are among the remainders of the Stone Age cultures, showing reindeer swimming across the fjords. A significant find area is between the river Tana and the fjord of Varanger, where the reindeer probably ran over the isthmus on the way between the winter and summer grazing. The question of the ethnic identity of the Stone Age cultures is politically charged, as many Sami feel the uncertainty surrounding the earliest settlers in northern Norway is being used to question the status as an indigenous people. Metals were introduced around 500 BC. The Sami culture can be traced back at least 2,000 years. There is also some archaeological evidence of Bronze Age agricultural settlements about 2,500 years old, as in Steigen and Somna. In 2009, archaeologists discovered evidence of barley grown in Kaifjord near Harstad in the Bronze Age 1000 BC, a larger settlement by people of Germanic origin, with substantial archaeological evidence seem to have occurred around 200–300 AD. These settled along the coasts roughly up to Tromsø. The two ethnic groups traded with each other, and there seems to have been quite a lot of intermarriage. The nature of the coexistence is still being hotly debated. In the Viking Age, several chieftains along the coast played a significant role in Norwegian history, usually resisting unification of Norway. The voyage and story of Ottar from Halagerland was recorded by the King of England, Harekь from Tjotta, and Torhund, who killed St. Olav at the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030, were important leaders according to Heimskringla. The chieftain and poet Øyvind Skaldaspiller was the first to receive international acclaim. His poems were rewarded when the Icelandic parliament organized a money collection to buy him a thick ring of gold. This flourishing period of resistance was followed by consolidation and centralization of the Norwegian state, which was dominated by southerners, reducing the power and wealth of the northern Norwegian chieftains. In the Middle Ages, churches and fortifications were built along the coast in an effort to stake a more firm claim for the Kingdom of Norway along what was then the frontier of Norwegian settlement. By 1150, Lenvik Church was the northernmost church in Norway. In 1252 the first church, the Ecclesia Sancti Mariae de Troms Juxtapagonost, was built in Tromsø, along with a small rampart intended to serve as protection against Karelian raids. This was followed in 1307 by the consecration of Bodø Church in what is now eastern Finnmark. Finally, Vardøhus fortress was constructed to mark and defend the border with the Karelian tributary lands of the Novgorod Republic. The traditional view has been that the fortress and church were constructed at roughly the same time, although recent research indicates that the fortress may have been constructed as late as the 1330s, after the border between Norway and Novgorod had become more fixed. At roughly the same time, the cod fishing gained momentum. Dried cod was exported through Bergen to the whole Hanseatic world, bringing prosperity to the north. This is reflected in the numerous pieces of imported church art from the late Middle Ages. There were numerous wars with the Republic of Novgorod in Russia at the time that stopped by the late 15th century, reduced fish prices in the 17th century, and the exploitative restrictive trade practices of merchants from Bergen, who had been granted a royal monopoly on fish trading, led to a significant decline in the population and grinding poverty for those who remained. Large coastal areas were depopulated, and Sami culture made a comeback, as it was less dependent on fish exports. After 1700, Russian pomors started to come every summer on trading expeditions, bringing rye in exchange for fish. Although this was in violation of Bergen's trade monopoly, and the Danish-Norwegian monarchy made some attempts to curtail the pomor trade, the trade was vital to the survival of many northern Norwegian fishing communities. In the 1740s, the first settlers started arriving in northern Norway from Finland. The traditional view was that these were refugees escaping famine and warfare at home, although modern scholars have pointed out that many were simply looking for their own piece of land, which was getting scarce in Finland as a result of rapid population growth. In 1789, the trade monopoly of the city of Bergen was lifted. Hammerfest and Bodø were issued the city charters, and Tromsø followed suit in 1794. Interrupted by the British blockade of the Napoleonic Wars, this introduced a period of unprecedented growth in the north, as the trade monopoly had previously made cities non-viable in northern Norway. Bodø was founded in 1816, and Vadsø in 1833. The Hurtigruten shipping line, introduced in 1893, gave quicker communications with the south. In 1906, the iron mines in Kirkenes opened. At the same time, the ethnic diversity of the area came under threat, particularly after Norwegian independence in 1905. The Norwegian authorities were insistent that all should speak Norwegian only, and schools became active tools of assimilation. The Sami language was banned in schools, churches and in public administration. Concerns about possible Finnish irredentism also led to increasing pressure on Kavans to assimilate. People who wanted to buy state-owned land in Finnmark had to prove they could speak Norwegian before they were allowed to settle. This region of Norway was the area most affected by World War II. In 1940, Norwegian and Allied forces fought the Germans to a standstill over the strategic port for iron exports of Narvik, until Allied forces and equipment were withdrawn, leaving the remaining Norwegians with no option but surrender. King Haakon VII and the government fled towards the north, and stayed in the Tromsø area for 3 weeks. On the 27th of May, Bodø was bombed by German planes, and on the 7th of June, the Allies retreated from the north, and the king and government fled to Britain from Tromsø. In 1944, the German Wehrmacht started to retreat from the Murmansk front. They burned everything after them in the area between the Russian border and the Lyngen Fjord. As part of the tactics, the population was forcibly evacuated, although a third of them chose to hide in the wilderness instead. All who were found were shot. After World War II, Norway made a huge effort to rebuild the destroyed towns and villages. Modernizing fishing and agriculture was important, as northern Norway was considerably poorer and less developed than the south. In 1946, the huge steel works of Mo I Rana were founded, heralding industrialization of the north. Transportation was also improved, as airports were built throughout the area, notably in Bodø in 1952 and Tromsø in 1964. The rail network was extended to reach Bodø in 1961. In 1972, the University of Tromsø opened, accompanied by a number of university colleges, notably in Bodø, Alta, Harstad and Narvik. In 1972 and 1994, the strong anti-EU movements of the North, largely based on concerns over EU management of its own fish stocks, were instrumental when Norway voted against EU membership in referendums. Sami language instruction was introduced in schools in the 1970s. In 1979, the building of a hydroelectric dam in Alta caused huge demonstrations, giving the Sami question national attention for virtually the first time. The result was a significant effort by the authorities to promote Sami language and culture. In 1989, the Norwegian Sami Parliament, Sametinget, opened, and the Law of Finnmark of 2005 was an attempt to deal with the question of land rights. A similar law is on the way for Nordland and Troms. Working against all this, emigration to the south has been strong after World War II. While there is a slight overall population growth in northern Norway, this is significantly lower than in southern counties. Although the regional centers of Bodø, Tromsø and Alta continue to grow at a relatively brisk pace. Lately, the offshore gas field of Snøhvit off Hammerfest has brought hopes of new development in the north. Languages. The northern Norwegian dialects share a common musical intonation, different from the southern dialects of Norway. Apart from this, there is great variation in sound system, grammar and vocabulary. In general, one can say that the southernmost of the northern dialects, particularly in Helgeland and Salten, are the most distinct. Notably, they cut grammar endings. In areas of Finnmark, the dialects are somewhat more in line with standard written Norwegian, particularly in those areas where Norwegian was primarily introduced by the school system as part of the assimilation process during the 20th century. In some inland valleys in the county of Troms, settlers from the inland of southern Norway immigrated 200 years ago. Even today, these dialects have southern characteristics in intonation and vocabulary. Earlier, northern dialects had a low status in Norway, but recently they have been used extensively in song lyrics, poetry, in TV and radio. Today, anyone can use the dialects. This is not to suggest that no prejudices remain. However, Sami is spoken in three main dialects: Southern Sami south of the Arctic Circle, Lule Sami mainly between Bodø and Narvik, and Northern Sami in the rest. Originally, Piti Sami and Uemi Sami was spoken around Bodø, but these dialects are now extinct on the Norwegian side of the border. Eastern Sami was originally spoken in Norden, close to Kirkenes, but it is more or less extinct. Overall, Northern Sami is by far the healthiest of the Sami languages today, primarily because it still has a relatively large number of first language speakers and maintains its dominance in core areas in Finnmark. Northern Sami is an official language in the municipalities of Rana, Kautokeino, Karasjok, Porsanger, Tana and Neseby. The Finnish spoken in western regions, from Storfjord to Porsanger, is quite distinct, although comprehensible for people from Finland. Further east, around Vaasa and Kirkenes, the spoken Finnish resembles Standard Finnish. People of Finnish descent in these eastern areas are also typically more likely to consider themselves as Finnish Norwegians rather than Kvens, arguing that the term Kven represents an attempt to cut them off from the Finnish roots. Finnish is official in addition to Sami and Norwegian in Porsanger municipality. It should be pointed out, however, that very few first-language Finnish speakers remain in northern Norway, and unlike Northern Sami, the Finnish language lacks a core region where it is still dominant in daily life. Coastal and fjord areas of northern Norway have much in common with western Norway, sometimes imagined in cultural terms as a shared coastal identity. The topography and fjord landscape, the rich fisheries, the culture and even some aspects of the dialects have clear similarities. Cuisine. Northern Norway is surrounded by some of the richest seas in the world, and seafood is the main source for traditional cuisine. However, agricultural produce has existed for at least 3,000 years in parts of the area. In addition to fishing, each family traditionally had a small farm with a few cows, sheep or goats, and had small grain fields. After the introduction of potatoes from the Americas, these became a main staple in much of northern Norway, as well as many other parts of Norway. Agriculture gradually becomes less important as a food source as one moves further north, and in the northern half was usually of minor importance and certainly less important than fishing, a Sami reindeer nomadic pastoralism. Hunting has been important ever since the Stone Age, and the comparatively large areas of sparsely settled valleys, fells and mountains still hold wildlife. In the winter, the codfish comes to the coastal waters to spawn, especially to the cod fisheries of Lofoten. Mulja, boiled codfish with liver and roe, is a delicacy that today is served in the best restaurants. In the summer, the cullfish, or side that bites, and fresh cider is often served on the beach, boiled in seawater over an open fire, or fried. Halibut is traditional Christmas food. Most fish is served plainly poached, only accompanied by boiled potatoes, carrots and possibly fried bacon. A more particular kind of fish is gammelsæ that has been conserved for a year or more. Other traditions are lutefisk and bonnafisk, the latter made from stockfish, and in Nordland often from herring. Sea wolf and rosefish are regarded as good food, the latter often eaten salted and poached, with the brain highly regarded, sometimes fried with onions. In addition to cod, herring and potatoes were traditional staple foods. Salmon has long traditions as food along the rivers, and also trout, which are common also in the numerous lakes. In the latest decades, consumption has increased in correspondence with increased salmon fish farming. Smoked salmon is very popular, often on open sandwiches, alone or together with boiled or scrambled eggs as salad. Traditionally, Northerners regarded shellfish and prawns as bait, but later they have developed a taste for it, and the freshest and most succulent prawns and shellfish are easily obtainable all along the coast. Shark meat has traditionally not been used as food, even if some can grow nearly 10 meters long. In later years, the large red king crab has invaded Norwegian waters from the east and, having reached west to Hammerfest, are now served in the finest restaurants. The large seabird colonies along the coast provided eggs for the local population. Most of these are now protected by law. However, in Tromsø, seagull eggs and beer from the local brewery is still a highly regarded dish to enjoy in the sun of late spring. Tender whale meat is usually served as steaks, whereas seals are an acquired taste due to the smell. However, when processed into Barents ham, it gets more palatable. Fresh seal meat is served at the end of the hunting season in spring, and Tromsø is the place to look for it. Reindeer are often served as finnebiff, thin slices in a cream sauce. Reindeer fillets have become more popular in high-end restaurants in recent years, but the price can be prohibitive as the reindeer industry is shielded from market forces by the Norwegian government. Lamb meat from sheep following the retreating snow line up the hills and mountains to get the most nutritious fresh vegetation throughout summer is highly regarded by the locals, and research seems to indicate that a varied diet does influence the taste of the meat. Game meat includes mountain hare, rock ptarmigan, willow grouse and moose. Foods with dairy as an important ingredient include waffles, pancakes and romagrot, the latter always served with sugar and cinnamon. None of the aforementioned are distinctly northern Norwegian foods, however, but are popular throughout Norway. There are a number of local traditions in this long region, including goat cheese from Bolsfjord, Blanklefs and other variations of lefs from Helgeland, and a number of variations of reindeer, an integral part of traditional Sami culture. Wild berries have long traditions in the local cuisine, and the most sought after is the cloudberry, used in marmalade, desserts and cakes. Other popular wild berries are bilberries, lingonberry, raspberry, and there are also a number of less well-known berries used for food. Mushrooms are common in the forests from late July to September and also has seen some use in traditional food. The use of kitchen gardens is limited by climatic factors, but still has a long history in the southern half of the region. Rhubarb and red currant has been used for more than 100 years. Red currant also grows naturally in much of the region. Black currant is also common in gardens. In addition to potatoes and carrots, rutabaga and sometimes cabbage have traditionally been grown. Many wild plants were used for medical purposes or as spices, such as garden angelica, but this has become rare in modern times. More lately is the imported strawberry, which has become popular and are grown locally. The unique growing conditions, with ripening in 24-hour daylight and modest warmth, is sometimes claimed to enhance flavor. Bioforsk, with research in terrestrial effects of climate and subarctic agriculture, has branches in 4 places in northern Norway: Tromsø, Bodø, Tjotta and Svanhovd in Sør-Varanger.